citizens killed entire populations. A captive program started in 1961 with 9 captured cats, expanded to 170 today. However, DNA has determined the program is corrupt with an unknown subspecies. Both wild and captive cats suffer from interbreeding that is reducing fertility. The Russians have rerouted a pipeline project and allowed anti-poaching teams to protect the magnificent cat. The world is watching. My name is Rising Moon, and this is a Small World Radio production.
Hi, this is Tony Roberts, and you're listening to WBAI in New York, the voice of truth since 1960.
The ice is gonna break.
How does it feel?
It feels like times have changed.
Center yourself, to be present, to be here. It is always appropriate to be here. Contemplate. If you ever happen to be someplace and you contemplate, I'm not here. Where are you? So in this moment, be here. Be here, wherever here happens to be. In this day and time, we have gathered together to contemplate, to dialogue this that is called
Night shift again. 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 Night shift. Night shift again.
I'll be damn late.
Now, where are my people? 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 Where are my people?
talking about it, and I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea why I'm here. I don't know what I'm doing, talking about this. I saw something, they saw something. There was a lot of light. That's all I remember.
There's no place to hide.
I wish they'd hurry up with that transmission. I want to go to bed.
I suggest that you reach deep down inside yourself there and try and find something that'll keep you awake just a little while longer, because this transmission coming up may just rekindle your will to live.
And you are tuned to listener-sponsored radio, WBAI, 99.5 FN, and on the web at WBAI.org. The name of the show.
Night shift again. 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 Night shift. Night shift again.
I'll be damn late.
I'm Mike Sargent, and this is Night Shift. 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 If you've been listening to Night Shift for a long time, you know that the theme of Night Shift is life is like science fiction. And here on the show, and especially this year, it being more like science fiction than ever before, we've talked about all kinds of things. We've talked about, of course, the impact of all the events going on and the surreality and the sense of science fiction, or living in a science fiction it gives us, but also the power of narratives, the narratives we're dealing with now, politically, racially, culturally, being plunged in a global pandemic in the midst of everything else that's going on in the world, that's been going on, has caused the rise of authoritarian regimes, and all kinds of nefarious and awful human rights violations are happening. To anybody who reads science fiction, this is just what human beings do. But there's always been a relation between fact and fiction, between science fiction and reality, narratives, storytellers. We've talked about the power of story and narratives, the power of story and how we deal with where we are today in the world, and how that sense of life being like science fiction, or it seeming like the Twilight Zone. We've had some great guests. We've talked about a number of things, all having to do with the theme of Night Shift. But every now and then we do something special where it might just be one series of interviews or one specific topic that doesn't vary too much. I had a chance actually to sit down and have what will be the beginning of what I'm going to call the Night Shift conversations. I had a Night Shift conversation with a fairly iconic storyteller. His name is Mario Van Peebles. Mario Van Peebles is part of a filmmaking dynasty begun by his father, Melvin Van Peebles. And if you don't know who Melvin Van Peebles is, then you should look it up. But Melvin Van Peebles is an icon, a living icon. He's still alive and still here with us, and his work and the impact of that work is still being felt in filmmaking. And his influence and what he did and how he changed the landscape culturally for civil rights, for black storytelling, for Hollywood, for black movies, and for independent filmmaking and distribution, period. Not to mention the numerous ways in which he pioneered marketing for film and film soundtracks. And not the least of his accomplishments was his essentially launched the blaxploitation film era. I say blaxploitation because blaxploitation is a term that was used to describe all these films that were coming out targeted towards a black audience that were in many ways aping what Melvin had done, the idea of an anti-hero, male or female, who's going up against the man. But it quickly, of course, in the hands of Hollywood became stereotyped. But there was more to those films. There's more to Melvin than just that one film, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. But he's a filmmaker, he's a writer, director, photographer, but also a father. And he produced, beyond the plays and the award-winning films and books and that he's written, he produced children, one of which is a son who himself became a legend in the business for doing iconic films. Probably most well known for New Jack City and Posse, but he's done so much, much more in film and television. He's a storyteller, and you'll hear in the conversation, he can tell his story better than anybody, not unlike his dad. But as an actor, he's done all kinds of iconic roles, from Heartbreak Ridge to playing his dad in the tribute film he made to him, Badass. But he's first and foremost a storyteller, and his sensibilities are dead on to what Night Shift is all about. So I had a Night Shift conversation with him about everything, about his career as a filmmaker, what his beliefs are, what his thoughts are on the power of art, the role of the artist, the controversy with 50 Cent, considering he's worked with him and he's in Power Book 3 right now, which is being produced. And we bonded because I had similar things happen. People asking me, oh, what's up with your girl when Stacey Dash, who was in my first film, well, just became the Stacey Dash we know today. We spoke about a lot of things. We talked about the election. We talked about filmmaking. We talked about storytelling. So for the next 2 hours, or less than 2 hours now, but we're going to have a conversation, a Night Shift conversation with Mario Van Peebles here on Night Shift, here on listener-sponsored radio, WBAI. All right, I'm here with writer, director, actor, producer, artist, storyteller, Mario Van Peebles.
Good to be here, brother.
Good to be here. I have 3 questions I like to ask all storytellers just before I ever interview them, because we have some things to talk about that are contemporary, that have to do with right now, but also things that have to do with, let's just say, this planet. So my first question to you is, when did you first know that you wanted to be a storyteller?
That's an interesting question. When did I consciously know?
Yeah.
You know, I was talking not too long ago to some folks who knew me when I was a kid, and they were saying how I was always sort of doing, in essence, what I do now. When as a kid, we traveled through Europe extensively. I was born in Mexico, hence the name Mario. How many brothers do you know named Mario? So my dad wanted to be a film director, and Hollywood wasn't receptive at the time, right? I.e., they didn't want any black film directors or elevator operators trying to be film directors as they saw it. So my dad and my mom took off to Europe, and that was it. So we were raised traveling through Morocco, France, so we speak a little this language, a little that language. And when I traveled around, as a kid, I don't know at what point I realized it, but people were different colors. They spoke different languages. and more importantly, they had different cultural truths. So in one culture, if you didn't cover up, except for your eyes, if you were a woman, you were considered a whore or a loose woman. And my mother wasn't that, or you were considered something else that would offend this culture, would not offend that culture. And what I started to notice was, I was also homeschooled. So it'd be, when you understand, you go, oh, wait a minute, you mean penguins in the North Pole kind of act like penguins in the South Pole. Penguins 100 years ago act like penguins today, right? That's penguin behavior. But human beings, and we're pack animals, have very different customs and social constructs that we've invented, and each culture has their own solution to the human question. What is good? What is right? What is respectable? So what's respectable if you're born into an Orthodox Jew with a very specific friend group and a very specific enemy group is a good woman does this, a good man does that. If you're born in the hood, a good man does this. If you're born 100 years ago, maybe women couldn't vote. If you vote, so you look at how mercurial culture is, and yet biologically, we still have the same fingers and toes as kind of when we were in Egypt, man. Do you know what I mean? So we've evolved very quickly, socially, and not per se biologically. And I don't know at what point as a kid. Now, I wasn't a kid thinking this, but as I was starting to notice that culturally, my family was different. My dad's black, my mom's blonde hair and blue eyes. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to see Rembrandts as a kid. I'm a different kid. So by the time we landed in America, my little sister was my best friend. We landed in America, and I went to school, and some young brother from the hood said, man, you and your sister sound like you're trying to sound white, which was a mind blow.
How many times I heard?
Okay, so I went home to my mom. I said, some boy in school told me that me and Megan were trying to sound white. And my mother, who's white, has always demystified whiteness for us. And she said, why would anyone want to do that? she said, white folks have been the colonizers and the bullies on the planet. We invaded and we enslaved and we murdered and we raped. We took this country, America, from the Native Americans, man. Why on earth would you want to imitate the bully? Imitate the beauty. And then she broke it down. She said, Mario, not only that, I'm so glad you got some melanin from your dad, because you're not going to get skin cancer as easy as I will. We've glorified a weaker gene pool. So I had a very interesting dynamic because my mother took me to see the Rolling Stones and hitchhiked to Altamont. My dad took me to Black Panther meetings, and I got to feel like I was growing up with the best of both worlds. The ability to talk to this constituency, the ability to talk to this group. As Kipling would say, to talk with the crowds nor lose your virtue, walk with the kings nor lose the common touch. So I had that. So as an actor, that was it. I was like, wait a minute, I can go here, I can go there. It was absolutely exciting as a kid to be exposed to the smorgasbord of cultural humanity. And then I was like, well, if I could act and show us our commonalities, our common denominators more than our differences, how dope would I be? If I could be a storyteller, you may never go to the Wild Wild West, back in time, but if I can take you there in Posse and show you a multi-culti Western, with folks of all colors, you may never go hang out with the Black Panthers, but if I can take you there in my movie Panther, and bring you inside that narrative, wouldn't that be dope? You might not ever really be inside the inner city, but if I can take you there in New Jack City, how dope would that be? And when they say, I want some New Jack cops to take down a New Jack gangster, I won't react like the studios did. I will make my group of multi-culti cops, one Asian, one Jewish, and one a brother, and mix it up and put the sister in charge, who's the dark-skinned sister who takes Nino down. So I had the opportunity as an actor to seek jobs and the opportunity as a director to be a job creator. And that combination allowed me to have a voice in how we as a people were presented. And that's super attractive to me, because I thought, there's a lot of stuff that our species does that I'm not a fan of. We pollute, we destroy, we do it. But I get to be working in the field that's beautiful, where we're in the arts, man. Human beings are capable We're capable of incredible cooperation, incredible art. You look at theater, you look at some of the plays, you look at music. We get to be in the arts, and that's a great advantage. I'm not selling, bombs to somebody or guns to somebody out the back of my pickup. I get to be in the arts. And so that's a win. I think there are 3 loves in life. Love what you do, love and enjoy the folks you do it with, Mike, and love what you say with your work. And if you get those three career chakras to line up, then you're rich no matter what the paycheck is. So this was the business for me, man.
All right. Well, you've answered a bunch of other questions there already. Well, let me ask you another question. As you're speaking, I can say, well, now I know completely why we're friends. So I have a similar worldview, and I love everything you said about what every culture has to offer in terms of, what it is, what it's learned as a people. But in your estimation, as a storyteller, because you've told stories in so many genres, as an actor is one thing, you're helping tell another person's story, but as a storyteller, in your opinion, what makes a good story and a story worth telling?
I'm glad you prefaced it by saying, in my opinion, because we get tricked into thinking that we're monolithic and you don't want to become a blackologist for everybody else. What I enjoy is going to be different than what Brother Spike enjoys, or Sister Ava enjoys. So, but I think for me, I like to tell a story that not only entertains but makes us think, that makes us discern. I remember a couple years back, Bush talked about President Bush, who now seems like a good cat compared to what we got now. It's like, woo, man, like the good old days. It's like, but he said something about the axis of evil, and I was thinking about what the axis of evil looked like in filmmaking. That if you said, well, then by logic, if there's an axis of evil, then there must be an axis of good. And that kind of filmmaking would probably look like what the tentpole movies from the studios are. Let's take it, for example, Spider-Man, where Spider-Man is in the uniform. He's got the American colors on his uniform, and the Octo-Man looks sort of like Saddam Hussein with 8 arms. Played very well by Alfred Molina. And you go, so that very, you don't have to discern who the bad guy is. But in real life, you know what? We all got a little of this. We all got a little of that. Real life is much more complicated. And I believe that the storytelling you put out there in the universe, although it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery, it actually helps form our American psyche. And therefore, exponentially, we export this commercial around the world, which creates this sort of cultural zeitgeist, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean this. Okay, I'm going to break it down to you. I remember this cat who directed me in something. He was a blonde dude from Sweden.
Okay.
He directed, and he had me, my dad, one of the Hudlin brothers, and Fred Williamson. And we were all in the show. Okay. It was just a little talk show, but it was kind of a heavyweight talk show. Okay. So we're all talking, and all thinking cats. And then at a certain point during lunch, he said, offhandedly, I knew there would be a black president. And we all looked at this white boy like, dude, we didn't know. Get out of here. How would you know? Yeah. So I said, man, come on. So he singled me out. He said, I tell you what, I'm going to take you to lunch after we shoot this. Somewhere expensive. You pick. If I can't convince you that I knew, I'll pay for the lunch. But if I can convince you that I knew there would be a black president, you pay for the lunch. I said, well, hey, who's the judge of that? He said, you be the judge of it. I said, baby, it's on. We picked out a spot. I hedged my bet just in case. He convinced me. And the dude, he's younger than me, right? A little blonde dude looks at me and said, okay, Marion, let me tell you this. When I grew up, for some reason, I saw your dad's movie Sweetback. And I was in Sweden. And then something hit me, and I saw Pam Grier in something. And I saw Tamara Dobson in something. And I said, man, that afro looks like a halo. I got to get me a sister. I got to get to America. He said, I saw Shaft, I saw Superfly, I watched the Panthers. I said, oh my God, I got to meet a sister. I got to get to America. He said, as a teenager, I came to America and I stayed with some friends of mine, some family who were Swedish. And their little white kids were going to bed every night on the posters of their heroes. And the hero they had in the front was Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson and Prince, and their favorite show was The Cosby Show. And he said those kids going to bed every night looking up at their heroes could one day conceive of a hero in the White House. Wow. He said you would not just be able to be a lead role on the screen, but a lead role in the political scene. I said, oh, wow. And then I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute. It was interesting, the line between there's a 20-year gap, you see. The kids that grew up seeing the Huxtables as America's favorite family, not favorite black family, favorite number one show, period. And I'm not talking about Cosby the man. I'm talking about the phenomenon of the show. So we got to differentiate that. Those kids that grew up, those little white kids in Iowa, like those kids he was talking about, grew up seeing a funny, clean, smart, articulate black family on TV every night. And some black folks said it's not realistic, it's not this and that. And guess what? 20 years later, they could conceive of the Obamas, a funny, beautiful, clean, solid, professional black family in the White House. And it wasn't until those white folks in Iowa that grew up on The Cosby Show voted for Obama that black folks could believe we had a chance to be president. None of us believed it. We thought, is this a real run at the office? Is this a Shirley Chisholm, very important run? But is it a symbolic run? Or is this a real... We couldn't believe it until we said, what? And that's directly that 20-year lag, brother. When apartheid fell in South Africa, and I told you this, the two favorite shows they were watching were Miami Vice with the white leading man and the black leading man, and The Cosby Show, and apartheid fell. Look at our attitudes on gay marriage now. But relate that to Will and Grace and Modern Family. Before you see it in life, you see it on the screen. When his brother, that's what it's like science fiction. So when his brother laid it out like that, I said, wow. So what I like when you say what makes a story for me as Mario Van Peebles, I want to tell you a story that, first of all, it's got to entertain me as an audience. But hopefully it makes me think a little bit. It takes me somewhere where I may not have gone. You know, I like to make an audience discern a little bit and make them evolve a little bit. And that's my goal. You know, entertain them, but make them think. Needless to say, I had to pay for that lunch too, because he broke it down. I said he broke it down. I got to pay for this lunch.
Well, you're really talking about the power of images and the power of belief, where we draw our belief from, and it all really comes down to narratives. You know, the narratives that we become accustomed to. You know, and what those narratives will mean to you. Again, in the context of your life. So that's very powerful. I do have my third question, but I have to say, you are tuned to listener-sponsored radio, WBAI. And since he just said his definition, which I think is one of the best definitions I've ever heard of what makes a good story and a story worth telling, is just something that takes you somewhere. That's the same definition that we have here on the show of the music we play. We call it damn good music because it's just music that takes you somewhere. So, here's some damn good music, and we'll be back. Mario Van Peebles.
We're born with this gene already inside. Only it is as if it's sleeping. Of course, it'll wake up someday. And when old Dexter's gene is activated, everybody's gonna die. Who knows how long we had it, so probably since we first walked upright. All that time, our little gene just stayed quiet like it did with the dinosaurs. And then, like a time bomb, it started ticking. Each year, we lose more. Please, believe me.
And you're listening to a Night Shift conversation with Mario Van Peebles, filmmaker, actor, storyteller, talking about his career, talking about the world. You've been listening to some DGM. I'm Mike Sargent, and this is Night Shift. We're on till midnight. I hope you're enjoying the conversation, so stay tuned. The third question I wanted to ask you, and I feel like I could just ask you 5 questions and we do the whole show, but the third question is, and you've touched upon this a lot, but I really am interested in your answer. Since human beings have been telling stories since the beginning of time, since every culture, whether it's drawings or Bible stories or made-up stories or fables or just fairy tales. Human beings tell stories. Human beings need stories. During this pandemic, what did people do? They holed up in their homes and binged. They watched stories. So why do you think human beings, especially with, you have a very unique, you're like a citizen of the world kind of life. Why do you think human beings need stories? What do you think the purpose of story is for humans?
That's a really interesting question, brother. Thank you for asking that. One of the things that I've noticed about one of my favorite roles out of all the roles I've played in this lifetime is the role of father. The role of father has been so dope. The love you get from your children is unparalleled. And as you know, my kids are getting bigger and they're slowly evolving into people I actually enjoy, genuinely. I genuinely enjoy my father and my mother, and you go, oh, they're getting conscious and relevant. What I understand and have observed, through my kids and other people's kids, before they can talk, all kids have an understanding of make-believe. You can cover your eyes and go peekaboo. You can do this and move the side. They have an understanding of, I'm pretending to be a cat now. I'm pretending to be a dog. You can play with a child before they can speak. And they have an understanding of make-believe. which I think is right in there with our need for narrative and our need for story. And they have an understanding for, okay, let's play a different game now. Let's switch up. Let's switch up the construct. I don't want a scary story. I want this kind of story. I suspect that our love of story has something to do with our need to position ourselves in the universe. You know, I saw a cartoon once, and it was these two caveman and woman. They're standing on a cliff, and this lightning bolt comes out and just breaks up a tree. Boom! And he looks over at that, and she goes, "Wow, what was that?" He goes, "I don't know. We need to invent religion." You know, we need to put that in some kind of context, because some heavy shit just went down that blew up a whole tree, and we can't explain it, and that's some scary thing. we gotta put that in a context. How are we protected from a phenomenon like that? What does that mean? Why is the sun coming up? And if the sun doesn't come up, there's no light, and we're in trouble. And if the sun does come up, stuff grows. So that must be Apollo riding his chariot across the sky, because he's a good dude, or that's what it is. And then at night, the other dude comes out, and he's scary because stuff might bite you. So we create these narratives because we have to understand how we fit into this, why we come and go, what happens when you die, is there a place when you die? So we all come up. So one thing we do know, we're all on this planet, hurtling through space. We call it Earth, although really it's more water than Earth. We know that the trees don't need us, we need them. The worms don't need us, we need them. We know that we're slowly devolving, we're slowly killing the very things we need to survive on this planet for this construct called wealth, which, you know, we've made this thing now, and we're spinning around and we're going forward, and we all have a different story about where you go after you die, if you go somewhere, and where you came from first. And while we're here, we share this experience, and that's confusing stuff, man. We need to explain that stuff. Now, here's the interesting thing. The other way I want to look at it is, why do we sleep? You said, why do we tell stories? I want to ask, why do we sleep? Well, when you study sleep, it's not just sleep that we need. It's REM sleep. Now, REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep, when you start to dream. If we're not allowed to dream, we eventually lose our minds and go crazy. And our need to dream, our need to go somewhere else is profound. It goes, I don't know that we fully understand that. Do you know what I'm saying? We fully understand our need to dream, but I think our need to dream is interesting, that it's not just the resting, because actually your muscles can still work. That's why if you go to sleep on your back, you might wake up on your side, because your body still can move, right? So there's something about our need to dream, if we are denied dreaming, that I think in a strange way also may be linked to our need to escape into a narrative. I have a friend of mine, one time he's going through a very difficult period in his life, and he said he had some surgery and he had to watch comedies. He said, I needed to escape my existence. Do you know what I mean? And at night he would have nightmares. So he said, I had to do it. Luckily, I could watch all these great comedies and escape, that it was actually therapeutic for me, that I could laugh and watch these comedies and escape. You know, we talked about what makes a good story. I would also say cultural context also defines a great story. If we're in a depression, and during the Depression, we wanted comedies and musicals. Do you know what I mean? So you have to look at context to also say, well, you might have done a very interesting story during the Depression that was not particularly positive, but maybe that story wouldn't get much love, but we might discover it now and go, wow, that was actually a very powerful story. So it has something to do from not just what we perceive, but the viewer as well. That the appreciation of that great story is also to do with where the consciousness is of the beholder. Make sense?
Oh, no, that makes perfect. Well, I'm just going to touch upon three things you said in all of that about the dreaming. One, there's a great screenwriting teacher, Sid Field. He said that movie going is like shared conscious dreaming.
Interesting.
I've never heard that before either, and I thought that was great because that is what it is, and that's what we're all missing now. I mean, doing it at home, it's a little more like sleeping. But the other thing you said was, this need to escape. It speaks to why we go to the movies, why we watch stories specifically, and specifically what we're looking for when we go to the movies, because obviously there's all genres. I think I've always believed that part of the reason why black historical dramas never do well theatrically is because that's an experience for both the white person and the black person, living in this country, especially if it's about something that's the history of this country. Nobody wants to feel uncomfortable in a movie theater. People want to go to escape. They don't want to go to see the amplified version of what they're dealing with every day. So I think that those are interesting, and I think those are really good answers. Now, let me ask you another question now.
I couldn't agree with you more on the history side. So you have to look at it and say, man, that slavery was sort of the American nightmare.
Absolutely.
So you got to say, did that make white people feel good? Probably not. No. Black people feel good? Probably not. So it's a challenge. And I'm the cat who directed Roots, man. I said I'm not going to do a movie about slavery, but I will do one about empowerment.
Now you see,
and so I flipped it, and I really explored the relationship with Kunta and his daughter. And in that, and I put that line in there, was not in the original script, where Kunta is training his daughter to be a warrior, because he's saying, you have to be a warrior. You're a woman in this country where they will do X, Y, and Z to you. You're going to have to be a warrior. And he says, now, very importantly, understand this. They'll start out putting the chains on your body, but afterwards they'll put them on your mind. You have to be willing and able to understand that and take the chains off your mind. So that's when you. So you said. So here's the situation, and that was they came to me to do Roots, and I said, "This is the kind of stuff I'm going to bring. Are you good with that?" And it's in the movie, man.
See, well, now speaking about chains on the mind, and the power of narratives, I'm going to dovetail into. The theme of this show is that life is like science fiction. And so I always come at it really with, like you said, your life gave you a worldview and inspired you to be a storyteller, because there are so many stories to tell. It's part of what makes this time, I don't know how you feel about this time as a black filmmaker, but I have to assume you're as excited as I am that there are all these voices getting the opportunity. There are all these genres we've never really been able to speak in.
One the other one's out.
Yeah. And exactly. Yes, they have. They had 110 years. And so I'm curious as to, because one of the other things we share in common as filmmakers is having worked with figures, celebrities, who their politics and beliefs then redefine them in the eyes of their fans. And because you have connected with them and worked with them, people go, yo, what's up with your girl? Okay. So for me, that's happened with Stacey Dash. Okay. Inundated, and every time she would make some new appearance, or especially when the new Stacey Dash was born. So the same thing has happened with you, with 50 Cent. So before I ask you your thoughts on 50 Cent, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts? I think I have a good idea, and you can touch upon this too. What are your thoughts on the role of the artist in society? Because I think the art is always influencing society. Whether if you don't realize that, then you shouldn't be an artist. If artists are the original influencers, which I think they are, then what is the role of the artist? When you have a platform, should you speak? People say, oh, you're an actor, shut up. You're a musician, shut up.
You're a ball player, shut up.
You're a ball player, shut up. But you are an artist. You are someone who has reached this position where people do look to you. And should you shut up, or what's your role? What's your take on that?
Interesting.
Before you get to your thoughts on 50.
Yeah, okay. And thank you for that. Okay, so here's the thing. Part of what you have to say is, what's your role as an artist? We got to be careful about that, because I had a guy ask me once, a reporter, and he said, Mario, why do black folks do well in the arts, in music, and in sports? And I was glad he asked me that, because it was just, you could see, some white dude wants to ask you a question. I didn't want to be make him scared, because I want to really know what he's thinking. And I answered it like I'm going to answer it now. I said, listen, I can't answer for all of us. We're not monolithic. I'm only going to have my own crazy Mario Van Peebles position on it. Having said that, I do have some thoughts. And I said, when you keep a people down, when you take away the drum, because it could be a talking drum and they could communicate with it, you don't necessarily stop. The Italian and goes, but give that brother that guitar in the guitar, so it might go dum, blues becomes jazz to meaning you could hold the funk. You couldn't keep the funk. The funk's gonna come out, right? But it pray to your African God, Jesus. Okay, cool. So when they sing to Jesus, it's falling tear, the falling tear, and mercy flowed beyond all bounds. You know what I mean? You got to forgive my rendition. Right. But what I'm saying is that drum, that rhythm came out. You couldn't repress Africa. That was coming out in our dance, coming out in the way we play ball. But there's something else. We don't win anything. Well, maybe a little bit, but we don't win a lot when there's a jury. If there's a jury, because the jury ain't of our peers, those nice white folks in Simi Valley will determine that Rodney King was trying to beat up their cops with his face. He was hurting their hands with a new type of jiu-jitsu called face jiu-jitsu. And they will come back that they're not guilty. So if it's a jury, if it's ice skating, we ain't going to win, because it's by opinion. But if it's mathematical, we're going to kill it. So Hitler can say he's the master race, but once they shoot the gun and you run, Jesse Owens going to come across that line. It's mathematical. We only win where it's undeniable. Mike Tyson don't have to be nice. He just knocks your ass out. Jack Johnson can have a white girlfriend. Way back when, 1905. And he knocks your ass out. There's nothing to say. So where it's undeniable, we win. But if it was a judge and a jury, we wouldn't get close. So we excelled in areas where we could not be denied. You could not deny that Wilt Chamberlain got pissed off and put the ball through the hoop 100 times in one game. Do you know what I mean? That's unstoppable. We're going to excel in places where we cannot be stopped. And that was sports and entertainment. When that sister picks up that microphone or sings without the microphone, you could get Madonna or some pretty white girl and sing with all kinds of trickology and back, technical stuff and make her look like she can sing. But when it came time to really sing, a cappella, you go to that church, you go, oh, she can sing. So when it's just straight up talent or just straight up skill, we can win if it's mathematics or by almost sheer force. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So because of that, and because black folks were allowed to get into areas, we were not allowed to be educated, so we wouldn't excel as writers or be recognized first as writers per se, but in areas that we were allowed into, and we were allowed into entertainment. So now you have black folks suddenly having a platform. So what you have to look at behind your question is, if I've let black folks finally have a platform where they can beat Joe Louis or choose, like Ali says, I'm going to be a different kind of champ. I'm not going to be like Joe Louis. Because remember, when Jack Johnson was champ, they went out and killed lynched 18 black folks.
I know.
They didn't have another black champ until Joe Louis, but they didn't want one who would fat mouth. They didn't want one to talk. They wanted to get a nice guy who'd be humble, who would just do the right thing, keep it quiet. So when Ali got in there, he said, I'm going to be a different kind of champ. And when Ali said it, the Vietnamese, you want me to go over there to shoot the yellow man for the white man, but he's not my oppressor. Every time someone's stopping me from getting employed, every time someone's breaking my neck, every time someone's burning down my church, they don't look like the Vietnamese. You don't want me in a plane, because I know where my enemy is. Woo! So yes, the dominant culture doesn't want that kind of truth spoken, but the only people who are going to be able to speak that truth are those with a platform. You feel me? And the people with a platform happen to be the entertainers initially. Of course, Brother Malcolm comes forward, the talented 10th, and all kinds of other folks, but you listen to certain cats, even musically. Bob Marley telling you to get up and stand up.
Sure.
He's telling you something. Don't give up the fight.
And like you said,
so
whether it's Malcolm or Martin,
Or LeBron James.
Or LeBron. But again,
those sisters playing basketball who say
Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte had to get behind them.
Had to
take a stand.
Take a stand. So if you're saying, wait a minute, the coincidence is that the one area that black folks have been able to get in and excel in and have visibility in, now you want to say shut up and dribble? I got a little issue with that. Now, having said that, okay, let's go to the Stacey Dash of it all. Brother, what's up with your girl? I go to movies for a second. They can have their movies, they're Dumb and Dumber. So why can't we have our version of that? Do you know what I mean? They can have their screw ups. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thing is this. I remember having a talk with the Hudlin brothers and Vondi and Gary F. Gray and Singleton. We all had dinner at my house. We were hanging out, and we were talking about the beauty of Dennis Rodman. And we were laughing. We said, the beauty of Dennis Rodman, he could marry himself, he could go be with Madonna, he could dye his hair pink. But we weren't mad at it. And the reason we weren't mad at it is because there were so many brothers in basketball who were clean cut. You could have Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson. That Dennis Rodman just was not an ambassador to us anymore. He was just his crazy self, just like I'm Crazy Mario or you're Mike Sargent. We no longer represented us. So we were allowed to be as crazy or as sane or as evil or as godlike or whatever as we could be. But we didn't represent all black folks. The problem is that in acting, to some degree, we're not there yet. You see what I'm saying? So if only 3 movies come out, and one's Medea, and one's this one, and then Stacey Dash speaks up, we go, oh my God, because we don't have a beautiful mind with black people. We don't have the diversity that they have. You can have a Woody Allen flick, and you don't think he represents all white folks. You can have a David Lynch flick. You could have a whatever flick, and it doesn't represent all of them, so they don't have to be ambassadors to self. We'll be much more comfortable with our Stacey Dashes, and if you will, our 50 Cents, once we're to the point where there's so many of us with voices that we go, okay, that's just crazy ass Kanye. I'm not, who knows what that Negro's going to do next. You know what I'm saying? So I think probably part of it is still the cultural embarrassment factor that we all go, man, I sure hope this dude who killed 5 people on the news isn't a brother.
Oh, please.
I still hope the chick who did this isn't a so-and-so. Do you know what I mean? We all whole time go, okay, it's not on us this time. Do you know what I mean? Right. But there is this sense that, and it's really interesting as a parent. I remember one of my sons was dating this lovely white girl. And her family lived in Oregon, and he was staying with them. And he's in his 20s, a great-looking kid. He's there, and she's lovely. And the family wanted him to feel comfortable. So they put on Empire on TV.
Okay.
Right. So now that, on Empire, they acted up and being scandalous. And I've directed some of these, shows. And I asked him, I said, how did that make you feel? And he said, it wasn't a good look, Dad. And he said, it was at that moment that he said, I realized something you'd been saying all along to me, Dad, that there are certain black folks that take us up and certain black folks that take us down. There are certain narratives that bring us up and are uplifting and certain that don't. He said, for example, I said, if they'd put on a Will Smith movie, I'd have been fine. If they'd put on a Denzel movie, I'd have been fine. But they put on something, like this, and you go, oh,
yeah,
man,
I understand.
It does not help the cause. You know what I'm saying? And so you go, I don't want to go to those artists and say, yo, man, take off the damn dress, You should have the right to do whatever you want to do. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to go to 50 and say, raise the consciousness. Yeah. No, brother, it's not that. It's freedoms by any means necessary. Don't equate freedom with money and start saying getting paid by any means necessary, because then a lot of low consciousness brothers and sisters imitate that, and that leads to genocide by every means. If you glorify Black Death in your song, you're going to see it in life. Now, I don't want to tell you what to do artistically, but if you're an artist and you don't bring consciousness to your work, unfortunately, we still get hit first and worst. I knew this when I did New Jack City. It was a real conundrum for me, because New Jack originally read like a black Scarface. And I said, man, I can't do that, but I could make Multiculti Untouchables. So if we refigure it, So that, yes, in The Untouchables, De Niro still has the badass gangster role, but against Sean Connery, Andy Garcia, and Kevin Costner, you had some conscious role models to say yes to, right? So I said, okay, Nino got the gangster role, but against my New Jack Cops, you got some conscious brothers and sisters to say yes to. And then, in the context of a gangster movie, you never identify with the victim, and thus the crime remains victimless. So what we do, we get Chris Rock to play the victim, to play the brother who gets addicted, and we deglorified the shit out of you look at New Jack, ain't no crap look glossy in that film. So when we showed that movie, Cat stood up, a dude, young brother with a 9 in his belt, stood up and when Chris Rock was getting addicted to drugs, and said, "Just say no." Well, I said, if we got that reaction in the context of a gangster movie, we got a real organic "just say no" message in the context of gangster entertainment. I'm okay with that. Right. So part of it was saying, okay, so as an artist, I said, okay, I can just shut up and dribble, or I can say, no, wait a minute, I'm gonna take this ball down court, and with each film I do, I'm gonna try to move the ball further down court towards consciousness.
And you are tuned to listener-sponsored radio, WBAI, 99.5 FM in New York and on the web at WBAI.org. This is Night Shift. We've been talking with Mario Van Peebles, filmmaker, actor, about his career, about storytelling, about the world and the current state of things. We call it a Night Shift conversation, because in the end, life is like science fiction. And if you're enjoying this show, please consider making a pledge. You can go to give to WBAI.org. You can make a pledge in the name of Night Shift. Become a BAI buddy for $10, $15 a month. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to keep us on the air. So if you're enjoying this, you're enjoying what we do here, please make a pledge right now. Go to give, the number 2, WBAI.org. Or you can just go to WBAI.org and there are ways to donate there. So please consider supporting listener-sponsored radio, WBAI.
What is it you're afraid of? You're afraid of. You're trying to get what to say.
I'm sure I don't hear what you say, Mr. Mark.
I'm wasting your time.
let's just say the perception is Black Lives Matter, but not more than my bank account. What's your take on the Black Republican? It's not from a party standpoint. I'm saying sticking by Trump. What's your take on that? I understand a Black Republican. I understand what the Republican Party has stood for. I understand conservative values. I understand all of this. I get it, but I don't understand. Or let's put it this way: I have my concepts, but I'm curious as to what yours is. just in general, for how people right now can still be of color and voting for Trump. What's your take on that?
Without sounding like Biden? Without... Because he just said, man, if you don't know who you vote for,
exactly.
you ain't even, but you don't even, what can I tell you, man? I mean, I know we're not supposed to say stuff like that.
No,
I get it. Okay, so here's the thing. You asked me a question, and part of why I pause is that I see it with different lenses.
Okay.
So I see it with different lenses. I said something earlier about it's very hard to correct 400 years of wrong with 8 years of right. When you've had almost 300 years of slavery, almost 100 years of Jim Crow, segregation, and then more recently, since the Voting Rights Act, 1954, right in there, not the Voting Rights Act, but a little before that, you've got us sort of moving forward, if you will. So when you look at the overall picture, we've actually come some distance. We still got ways to go, but we have come some distance. And I have a question for you when we at the end. I just want to ask you a question. I think a couple things. One, when slavery was around for those almost 300 years, there was no indication that it would end. So you were living in something that you didn't know would end. And unlike slavery prior to this, in Africa, if you were enslaved by the tribe that defeated you, you could buy your way out. You could marry your way out. You weren't there perpetually, and your kids weren't born into slavery. So it was it was a different deal. We had slavery over there, but it was a whole different thing. This was the first time that you were slaved by the color of your skin perpetually. And what's interesting is you had that phenomenon of the house nigger and the field nigger that Malcolm talks about. And it's not just a color thing, it's also a mentality. That the house nigger who got to live next to the master got to the point where he loved the master so much. It's a strange phenomenon that the master got sick. He said, boss, we sick? We sick? How we doing today, boss? How we doing? We sick today? We good today, boss? We good today, boss. And you saw that Sam Jackson role in Django, man. He played that really well, where there's such self-hatred. That what is this nigga doing up on that nag? How does he have the right to ride in here on that horse like a white man? If anyone should be riding like a white man, it shouldn't be me. What is he doing up on that nag? And being extra hard on people of color and extra hard on our women. And you look at the bizarre parallel in hip-hop between the treatment of women, the depiction of women, and the way a slave master would do it. As you think about the slave master putting the slaves on the auction block and touching them and measuring them and feeling on their teeth or their ass or whatever it is and deciding to buy them, you kind of look at the way women are depicted in some of these videos, and it's not that far away. And what's interesting is if you have X amount of years believing that your life is worth less and that you're in a country that does not believe in your beauty, does not believe in your hair, does not believe in even God don't look like you, Easter Bunny don't look like you, no one important looks like you. After a while, you just want to win. You just want to be on the winning team. You don't give a damn. I just want to be a winner. What do successful people do? Gee whiz, I don't know. I'm not a conscious cat. Right? And maybe I didn't learn to read, so I can't read to learn, because if you learn to read, they're going to give you their books. It's when you read your books that you really have a deeper understanding of education. I believe that after that many years, and then getting to a place where you're only 3/5 of a human being, you want to do and behave to some degree like the dominant culture, like the oppressor. And so you start to treat yourself, call yourself nigger. You start to abuse yourself. As my dad said, when he wrote a poem, he wrote this lovely song in a play called Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death, where Minnie Gentry, the bag lady, finally explodes at the end and sings. And she turns to the audience and says, I put a curse on you. Put a curse on you. I'm going to fix it so your men folk can't see no beauty in your women folk too. I'm going to fix it so your enemy's God too. You go from one bag a day to two, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, and every time you get hip to the old hype, the man lays a new hype on you, put my curse on you. And then he says, I'm going to fix it so your Your young folk kill each other in the streets because all that meanness squeezed in them ain't got nothing else to do. Think about that. All that meanness squeezed in them ain't got nothing else to do. We kill each other at alarming rates because we treat each other the way the master treated us, like we were 3/5 of a human being. It takes a while. It's going to take a couple generations for us to love our skin, to love our hair, to see our sisters as beautiful without straightening their hair, without buying some Korean woman's hair. You know what I mean? It's going to take a while for us to love the melanin in our skin. Do you know what I mean? So I think in multiple ways we adopt their standards. And as Paul Robeson asks, when you buy into the zeitgeist, to the values of a people who would buy and sell you and your people, what have you become? And I posted this on my Instagram. You know, I'm follow me on Instagram, Mario Van Peebles. I'm verified. I posted this on Instagram, and I asked that question, and I said, "So what are you now? What when you start to parrot the views of the oppressor, who's blinded by the money god? You're just mini robots. You're like the modern day Uncle Tom, just parroting and confirming for the dominant culture that we're as hyper-sexual and hyper-violent and as ignorant and hyper-materialistic as they think we are." So you look at the behavior of Donald Trump. He's kind of like a gangster, right? And not really a successful one when you really peel it back. That's because he goes bankrupt regularly. That's the irony. But if you watch Scarface and go, a lot of black folks like Scarface. Well, let's really look at that. The behavior of the dominant culture was the bully of the planet, right? The they didn't discover America. They gangstered it. They wiped the Native Americans out. They didn't declare war on them. They didn't declare war on the Vietnamese. They wiped them out. They didn't declare war on black folks. They just stole them. We are prisoners of war. And when you start to imitate the guy who imprisoned you, you got to ask yourself what's going on. When we start to say what the value of us is money, you got to remember racism is related to sexism, is related to classism, and lookism is around the corner from the wholesale destruction of nature. So what I mean by that is if I'm racist enough to exploit people of color, I'm probably going to be sexist enough to repress my women. I'm probably going to have class issues and repress the poor. And now that means I'm going to commodify everything. I'll cut down those trees and I'll sell them until there's no trees left. I'll pollute the water until there's no clean water left. I'll poison the air until there's no air to breathe. So if we imitate the bully, if we imitate the colonizer in its purest form, there's no planet B. So it's such a destructive mentality to be a part of that it's hard to speak on in sound bites. You know, it's very difficult because you got to go. So when you say, I'm with Donald because I don't want to pay a little more in taxes, are you okay with a guy who inherited an economy and takes credit for it and wants to take zero blame for a pandemic he ignores, even though people who are the same color as 50 and you and me are going to get killed first by ignoring this pandemic? Are you okay with, because your pocket's a little fatter, are you okay with all your fan base, all those fans of yours, you know, who love your music, being who are the bus drivers and the caregivers and the teachers getting sick? You got to look at that. And so when you disconnect and you adopt the colonizer's point of view, you kind of you've sold out, man. And I'm not saying in a negative way like you're deliberately selling out, but mentally you've lost connection with something that I think that our original people would go, wow, you really bought into the okie doke. You bought into, like Paul Robeson said, you bought into the beliefs of a people who would buy and sell you, and you've commodified self. And that same thing of being okay with killing brothers, and I'm rapping about how I shoot more brothers than you, how I treat women, how I look at myself. If you adopt the colonizer's point of view, we're only 3/5 of a human being, and that ain't much. And we are way better than that. I'd say we're better than that. Man.
I'd say so. By the way, that last line, only 3/5 of a human being, and that ain't much. That sounds like a title your dad would come up with.
Yeah.
It's called, ain't supposed to die at your death.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
All right, here's my last question. You touched upon something earlier that I agree. You say if, before it can happen in reality, we see it in imagination. A black man is president. There definitely were, James Earl Jones was president in a movie in the 70s called The Man, a fictional piece written by Rod Serling, based, I forget the original writer, directed by Joseph Sargent, no relation.
Who directed me later in a stellar movie. It was one of the worst flicks I ever did, called Jaws: The Revenge.
Oh, that's right. Jaws: The Revenge. That's right. Okay, all right, there. But hey. Connection. All right. Well, The Man was a good movie. If we can imagine it, it could be said that when aliens come, well, we've seen it in the movie, so we're prepared. But I think most black folks probably would have been sooner think aliens would come than we'd have a black president. Art does imitate or influence life. And considering you've worked in genre, and the power of genre, whether it's a Western and changing that narrative of what the West was like, whether it's a cop drama, you've done science fiction, you've done probably every genre there is. I'm a big fan of science fiction because of the power it has. I also believe that science fiction and comedy and probably horror I'll have to include as well. What science fiction and comedy can do is allow you to speak about the human condition in a way that is not didactic, that is not preachy. It can be, the red people against the blue people, and, it's not literally, but what are your thoughts on the power of genre, and specifically science fiction? What are your thoughts on just how it does influence life?
You asked some good questions, and I can't wait to ask him my question.
Okay.
What are my thoughts on power? Well, here's the thing. I did a show called Superstition.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was interested in the concept of, how people of color act under these same constructs. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. Because to some degree, people of color have lived with terrorism a lot longer. So you have 9/11, and a lot of folks wake up and go, "Oh my God, we have this horrible attack on domestic soil." We've had domestic terrorism on the soil for a long time. It just wasn't really called or framed as domestic terrorism, from the bombing of the church in Birmingham with the 4 little girls to on and on and on and on, even till now with this current president, this current administration that refuses to classify domestic terrorism as a serious issue. In fact, the most serious issue. You're more likely to have something jump off from someone that, with blonde hair and blue eyes, unfortunately, than you are from some dude named Muhammad something. So I was interested in seeing, what do we act like when the shit hits the fan? They had a video on YouTube where it showed people being scared. They said this guy would jump out of a box like a Jack in the Box.
And I think I've seen
so people,
stuff like that.
The guy would jump out, and the people go, ah, and then they jumped out with the brother. The brother just
punched him out. Yeah.
It was like, we inherently know, man, don't do that. I remember someone rolled up behind my dad. Just a friend was grabbed on him. He said, "Man, don't do that. You don't know what we got. We don't know. Don't do it. You're about to get taken out. You might be around, but I ain't going to be. There's not going to be a lot of time to find out."
Right.
So I think we have a different sort of immediate response, and I was interested in seeing that, and I thought they played wonderfully with that in Get Out. Whereas what is the line
absolutely.
where we go? It's like we hear, there's the haunted house, and
right.
and we hear. The voice goes, but we're looking for the kitten. There's the
right,
kitten.
Right.
Kitten runs the car. So typically the blonde lady runs in there with a nightgown, or a teenager, and
right.
Here, kitty, and you're, whoa. Now look, brother goes, hey, you know what? That may be someone playing around. Right. It may not be someone playing around. Why take the chance? Kitty gonna have to come. Say, Kitty, I'm out. Do you know what I mean? So there's a different sort of realism. Like one of the things I remember my dad saying to me was the difference between a white man and a black man. The white man wakes up, he goes, brushes his teeth, he goes downstairs to have breakfast, he gets his suit on, and he goes to work. Black man wakes up and goes, oh, I'm awake. brush his teeth. Wow, everything's cool. Goes down, food's in the fridge, good. Car starts, clothes are still here. Whoo, this is a good day. There's a different not taking stuff for granted quality. So I was interested in seeing the duality of those two worlds, saying, okay, how would they react? How would we react? Secondly, I think in terms of the futuristic part, I was interested in projecting that into the future, saying, you know, what would that look like? What do the isms we deal with now look like in the future? And do they exist, or is there a new kind of thing? I remember there was one show that used to do that and play with interesting stuff was Star Trek. There was one episode where there's a guy who's fugitive, he cuts on the starship, and he's half black and half white.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Lokai is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Well, look at me. Look at me.
You're black on one side and white on the other.
I am black on the right side.
I fail to see the significant difference.
Lokai is white on the right side. All of his people are white on the right side.
Commissioner, perhaps the experience of my own planet Vulcan may set an example of some value to you. Vulcan was in danger of being destroyed by the same conditions and characteristics which threatened to destroy Charon. We were once a people like yourselves, wildly emotional, often committed to irrationally opposing points of view, leading, of course, to death and destruction. Only the discipline of logic saved my planet from extinction.
Commander Spock, I am delighted that Vulcan was saved, but you cannot expect Lokai and people like him to act with self-discipline any more than you can expect the planet to stop orbiting its sun.
Let Lokai state his grievances. Hear him. Listen to him. Maybe he can change. Maybe he wants to change.
He cannot change.
Change is the essential process of all existence. For instance, the people of Charon must have once been monocolored.
You mean like both of you?
So I was always interested in how we would play with that, you know, how we would play with alternate universes. Did you see a movie called The Invention of Lying?
Love it. Love it.
Do you know that movie was...
Love it.
That movie, I'm moving out with my kid. That movie, I'm interested when you go, oh, wow. In fact, I wrote a movie where this guy who's an unbelievable character winds up saving a bunch of people and winds up dying in an electric chair. And these people discover him years later and they create a myth about him and they walk around with little electric chairs hanging around their neck.
Okay.
He died in an electric chair. Do you know what I mean? And it was just that when you start to play with beliefs and stuff,
I love it.
You peel back the lid on stuff and you really make us ask questions. You know, even futuristic movies like WALL-E. You see WALL-E?
Listen, we're living WALL-E now. Okay,
we're getting close. I love seeing what the future could look like and making us stop and think and go, what's that like? But particularly seeing folks of color. One of the best things I love best about Black Panther, the movie, was the little sister who was a science geek. You can't get black folks to see a perfectly good movie like Akeelah and the Bee.
Right.
You know, based on a real situation.
Right.
About a sister who can spell her ass off.
But
right?
in the context of
science fiction,
yes, you can.
She's not shaking her ass. The little sister is making science cool. She's on it. She's saving people. She's active. That does more for a little black girl watching that movie going, I can do that. I can be that. I think that's so powerful. I have a friend whose white son said, I know what I want to be for Halloween. I'm going to be the Black Panther.
You see that
is dope.
It's more than dope. And you know what else it is to me? It shows the power not only of story, but one of the reasons I think that movie did so well is not because it's not the best science fiction movie, but just the idea of a place on Earth that has not been colonized. What could happen? That's a huge what if.
Oh, it's a great what if.
Huge. And we've never seen it.
And then the dilemma of the Republican dilemma, the Black Republican dilemma. Right. Do we help our brethren? Do we help these brothers who don't know we're out here with our vibranium? And then I did a little spoof on it because my kids were clowning about it. So we did a little spoof. You can see it on my Instagram. Where we see, because it's Wakanda, you know, you had to go to Wakanda, you had all these beautiful brown-skinned people in Wakanda. So what about the light-skinned Negroes? so we come from a place called Wakanda. I love it, yeah. Now, my question for you. I believe that Trump is the cultural backlash to the Obama presidency. Like we talked about Jack Johnson being the heavyweight champ, and they went out and lynched a number of black folks that night. I think that the backlash when you get no drama Obama, who's smart, his lovely lady in there for 8 years, they didn't get executed, thank goodness, no one shot them. The reaction to that is the craziest, most out there, vile dude they could get. Sort of like the warden. I'm going to keep the browns and the blacks from getting near the voting polls. I'm going to make America great again. I'm going to take you back to a time and a place before all these people of color were doing this and that, and I'm going to delegitimize his presidency, and I'm going to unravel everything. I think there's a real cultural backlash, and I think that's a big part of his presidency. And my question to you is, if you knew that, if you could look down and say, you know what, if we get this guy, President Obama, in office for 8 years, the backlash will be Trump for 4. Is it worth it?
Well, yes. I'll tell you why I say that. I feel that one thing that has happened, now the pandemic is the wild card. Okay, that's the wild card here. But I think the one thing that has happened is that, as we were speaking earlier, that Trump has sort of, ironically, this year is full of irony. In a year where we all have to wear masks, this presidency has lifted the mask on America. It's lifted the mask on America for the world. So America has had an image problem. I think that we bought into, and I say we, there's the collective we, and we bought into the American dream. Anybody could be anybody. You could become anything here. And it happened, and you're like, oh, snap. Okay? So I agree with you that there's a backlash, but I think it's worth it because of what is to come. I think what is to come, there's a certain point, is like you can't unlearn what you have learned. You can't unsee what you had unseen. One of the things that happened during this pandemic was people were, one of the reasons that the Black Lives Matter movement took off is because people were suddenly not caught up with all the distractions and escapes that they had previously had. And they could actually go, there's this level of injustice going on. And it's not like in some other, it's not in Biafra, the starving children, this is here. So I think that is one thing that's happened. The downside, to me, the thing that he's done, the worst thing or the most powerful, destructive thing he's done is that he's obliterated reality. He's obliterated reality in terms of, people, the term I had mentioned to you before I would use is that they used to have this thing called rotational therapy, where they thought that if they spun you around, it would help cure you. And then when you finally, and you'd agree, and it was a ridiculous theory, but it did lead to the discovery of understanding, more about vertigo. And I think vertigo, everybody understands vertigo. We went through rotational therapy, which was all this spinning around, all this information going on that you can't tell, fake news, real news. And now we have political vertigo. We have people are not quite sure what's real. We have to course correct. I think the backlash now will be to finally change things for good. That's the optimism point of view.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it.
You don't think I'm being too optimistic?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't. I don't think you're being too optimistic. I think we go in cycles. I think you look at these kids who are reacting to gun control and bringing a consciousness. Some of the, just when I think we're down, they get up there and speak, and Dr. King's granddaughter's up there, and I'm like going, wow. And these young kids are articulate and speaking out, and they're concerned about the planet, and I'm like, whoa, okay, there's a leap in consciousness that I think they're going to hold him and this party responsible. I think this party have to really look in the mirror and decide what they're about. And I think it's healthy. Listen, if something of my mentor, one of my mentors, Stephen Cannell, said to me, back when he was alive, he said, Mario, the trick to raising kids is be who you say you are and create an environment where they can talk with you and ask you things. And I think this party needs to really think about what it is, and we need to ask it and hold it accountable. And I think I believe that will happen. And maybe I'm being too optimistic. We all remember what happened in 2016. We don't know. We don't know the answer. But I believe we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and think this out. I also know that scientists are saying that the world can hold about 8 billion people. We're close to that now.
Yeah.
And if that 8 billion, here's the trick though. That 8 billion acts like and behaves like
16
developing states,
right.
the developing countries. The developed countries. It has the footprint of 16 million. The commercial that we sold, Good Life, is not sustainable in the bigger picture. We don't have a lot of time to mess around.
No.
And we need clear and decisive leadership. And I think what I do like about Biden, one of the things he said is, look, I'm a transitional cat. I am going to be the connector between the next generation. I understand that. I might not do this for 2 terms. Do you know what I mean? I am hopeful. We definitely need to course correct. I think also, though, the thing of growing up, for those, there were kids that I've talked to who grew up with the president they knew was Obama. You know what I mean?
That's
and so the first lady they knew was Michelle. And we don't know what the psychological effects of that will be, but I bet it'll be profound.
And the contrast.
You know what I mean? They'll be like, wow, if you didn't think your vote mattered before, if this doesn't tell you that your civic duty, that America's built on capitalism and democracy, and if you're not a part of owning something or some kind of business and you're not voting, then you are non-existent and you're taking yourself voluntarily out of the game.
Well, I have to say I agree with you 1,000%. I do think the youth is the most optimistic part of all of this. I honestly, it sounds like science fiction, but I would like to see the rise of a third party, because I think both these parties are pretty much obsolete. I think that they both have allowed the voting process to be corruptible because it was beneficial to both parties. I just think that the Republicans outthought and outmaneuvered the Democrats.
And we have a couple things to deal with. One, it's not a true democracy because this electoral college is crazy.
Electoral and gerrymandering. How can there be such a thing?
Gerrymandering,
how can there be such a
college,
thing?
And the Supreme Court issues.
Yes.
And all this court stuff. So we're gonna, on the average, here's the thing. This is a trick. When I was doing some research, a white judge will sentence a black person to longer, in general, for the same crime. But a Republican judge will sentence a black person to an even longer period.
Yes.
The same crime. And Trump has done nothing but get all these Republican judges in, and they're not black. So it's an interesting phenomenon that we're going to have to really deal with, not just on the Supreme Court, but the circuit courts. Yes. So I think gerrymandering, the courts, and of course the Electoral College are all things you have to examine, as well as we can't give D.C. statehood. I don't understand that. Or Puerto Rico. I don't get it. How are you going to have taxation without representation? Isn't that counter our very basic values?
It's counter all the American narratives I heard.
Yeah. So there's some real things to examine. To do that, we're going to need it to be there. And I'm going to vote for you when you run for office.
Please. I'd be running.
But back to what I was saying, I do think there's room for thinking. I think that the Republican Party is going to have to really re-examine itself. We know that if their base is old white men or white men without college degrees, that's not getting bigger. And so they're going to have to examine how they either expand their tent or what they're going to do. I don't see it playing into the future without really looking at this game a different way. Because there's going to come a point where your only strategy can't be, I'm going to keep the other team from showing up at the polls, therefore we're going to win.
Well, there's a bigger strategy too. I mean, that's a huge part of the strategy, but I think also, because this is what Nixon did after the Civil Rights Movement, where they call it the Southern strategy, where, you just divide and conquer. You prey upon the racist tendencies of, it's how they got so many Republicans or Democrats to go Republican at that time. So I feel
and the voting rights,
and the voting rights act. Yeah. So I feel
that's when the Dixiecrats would lost it, because
So anyway, I am cautiously optimistic, but I am optimistic about the future. So, Mara, I want to thank you for taking this time to have. I have a whole idea of what I'm going to call this conversation. So, but I appreciate it.
This is lovely, man. It's food for thought. It'll last me a whole week.
Okay, so and for those listening, your all your social media is the same.
Yeah, Mario Van Peebles on Instagram, verified. That's it. That's what I do.
Thank you, sir.
All right, brother.
Extinction Diaries. First of the year 2020, scientists announced the extinction of the Chinese paddlefish, one of the world's largest fish. The last sighting was in 2003. The species was fondly known by locals as the panda of the Yangtze, the river where it has existed for at least 200 million years. Tragically, the Yangtze River was recently the location of the Baiji dolphin extinction. The paddlefish, whose first appearance predates flowering plants and bamboo, has survived several mass extinction events that included many species that lived in the same river. The unique paddlefish grew up to 23 feet and had a sword-like snout that produced electrical activity that could sense prey. The cause of the paddlefish extinction sits squarely on human activity like pollution and dam building. Humanity is forcing species that are physically more adaptable for survival than us out of existence. What will happen when our own population faces the edge of extinction? My name is Arne Oliveira, and this is a Small World Radio production.
Do you have questions about how to vote in the upcoming election? If so, please listen to this message. You might want to write some of this down. There are 3 ways you can vote in New York State: by absentee ballot, by voting early in person between October 24th and November 1st, or by voting in person on Election Day on November 3rd. The following links will tell you everything you need to know about the 3 options. In New York State, go to voteearlyny.org. That's voteearlyny.org. If you don't have access to a computer, the information is available by phone through the New York State Board of Elections at 800-367-8633. That's 800-367-8633. And if you live in New Jersey, you can access what you need to know to vote by going to vote.org/state New-Jersey, or call your county board of elections. Please join in voting in this critically important election. Thank you. This message has been brought to you as a public service by WBAI Pacifica Radio.
This is the professor, Dr. Ron Daniels. The Institute of the Black